What's going on, adventurers? Vulkan here, and today we're talking food. So when it comes to farming your watermark, clearing expeditions, or just really kind of anything in New World, you want to give yourself any advantage you can. And something that I've seen some people forget about are food buffs. Now, these are often overlooked because people focus on eating rations because those provide health regeneration. But there are other foods that improve all kinds of different stats for your character. You have foods that increase your base attributes, others to improve your gathering, and even some can boost the gear score of your crafted items. Not to mention, you have some that are specific to certain modes that increase things like movement speed or even damage to other players. So all in all, cooking isn't just about restoring health, it's about giving yourself an advantage in all aspects of New World. Now, the recipes we're going to be talking about today are the ones that you get by default as you level up, but there are some kind of ones at the tippity top that are found in provision crates, elite supply chests, and just scattered throughout level 50 plus zones. So if you're missing one that I'm talking about, hit up the trading post to see if you can either buy it or go out and farm some crates to see if you can find it. So let's get things kicked off with the basic ones, and those are attribute focused ones. So here we're talking about which foods you want to take because they're either cheap to craft and you can make lots of them, or they're ones that are the top end foods that you need to make sure to eat when things get serious because they give huge boosts to attributes that you care about. So I'm going to break this up by role. So for instance, if you're a healer, here are the foods you want to eat. If you're a tank, DPS, all of that as well. So let's go ahead and get things kicked off with healers. So when it comes to healers, the first one that I want to talk about is the melon cream tart. This is one that you get by default, and this is a food that's going to increase your focus by 6 and your intelligence by 4 for 25 minutes. This one is great for lower level characters because, again, it's available very early. Now, unfortunately, this one is also pretty expensive to make because it requires a pastry crust, which in turn requires salt. And salt, I don't know about you guys, but salt on my server is just insanely expensive. I'm talking 50 to 60 gold each, which is just crazy. And that's just not a sustainable food that you can make because it only lasts a half hour and it just doesn't give a huge buff. So you don't want to spend 60 to 80 gold per melon cream tart, only getting your focus increased by 6 and your intelligence by 4. But I did want to talk about it because this is one of the earlier ones that you can get that will help out healers. So if salt comes down, or maybe your server, salt is super cheap, go out, pick some of this stuff up, and get some melon cream tarts made. Now, if you can't afford melon cream tarts, then I would highly recommend game meat skewers. These will give you a 6-point boost to your focus and a 4-point boost to your constitution. Again, this is one of the earlier level foods that you can eat. And the nice thing here is that these are super cheap and easy to make. You have game meat, which is found on rabbits, and cooking oil, which is super easy to make. And then you have peppercorn, which are really cheap, oregano, which is also cheap. So if possible, I would definitely go for these meat skewers and get a nice boost to both healing and your health. Now, if you're okay with having a huge boost to constitution and focus, then go for the slow roasted bear flank with root vegetables. This one is top notch. It gives you 24 points of focus, 16 points of constitution, and the recipe itself is super cheap and easy to find. I mean, the only rare item here is that rich bear flank, but those aren't incredibly pricey from what I've seen. So you should be able to get out there and make this one relatively easily. Now, the top tier food that I recommend is the blackened maji maji with corn succotash. I love these names. I feel so fancy saying all these names, like Gordon Ramsay or something. So this is a tier 5 food that increases your focus by 40 for 40 minutes. However, this one does require a legendary fish called the lava barb, and this can be found in Shattered Mountain. So if you have high enough fishing, you can go fish one of these guys up yourself, or you can just go to the trading post and pick one up. So overall, because this has a legendary fish in it, it's going to be fairly pricey, but the rest of the ingredients are actually super basic and shouldn't take long to farm, or they shouldn't cost much to buy. And that's something I did want to talk about. A lot of these top end foods do require a legendary fish. So as we go through this list, you're going to hear that a little bit more, but just keep in mind, legendary fish aren't exactly extremely expensive. On my server, some of the legendary fish are like between 40 and 80 gold. So it's not like, you know, you're breaking the bank, right? I mean, salt over here is 60 gold itself. So that's just something to keep in mind, but just know sourcing these might be a little bit more difficult. So that wraps up the healer. Let's move into the tank. So tanking standpoint, you want constitution and strength, right? Those are the two big stats you want. More health, but also being able to deal damage and unlock some of those extra bonuses. So if you're looking for a pure boost to constitution, then I would highly recommend the Tarragon poultry sliders as your low tier food. This dish gives a 10-point boost to constitution, but the only issue here is that you need tarragon, and that herb, like salt, is pretty expensive. My server has these going for 26 gold each, and that is just too much, especially for only a 10-point boost to constitution that lasts 25 minutes. Now, if you want to tackle a high tier food that gives pure constitution, I would recommend the roasted rabbit with seasoned vegetables. This gives a 40-point boost to constitution and lasts for 40 minutes. Now, this one does still take tarragon, and it takes another thing called a sumptuous rabbit, but with this large of a boost to con that lasts a little over a half hour, this is probably worth the 26 gold for tarragon because you're getting so much more. It's like, do you want to pay the 26 gold for tarragon to get 10 points or 40 points? Obvious no-brainer, go for the 40 points. Now, the cheapest food I've been able to make for tanks is game stuffed apples with mushrooms. These are extremely easy to source because all it uses is game meat and mushrooms, which are extremely plentiful. And because apples and nutmeg are also relatively cheap, you can make a ton of these to increase your constitution by 6 and your focus by 4. So if you're a paladin tank, these are a great food to eat all the time. 1, to get those bonuses, but 2, it still restores your health. So this is kind of one of those other things that's a no-brainer. So the last tank food I do want to touch on is the turkey thigh with gravy and berries. This is a massive boost to con and strength, and this brings some great benefits to the table. Plus, this one does also call for tarragon and a poultry thigh, but just like the roasted rabbit, I think this large of a boost is worth the cost for the tarragon. Now, most of the other foods for tanking are still wildly expensive because a lot of them require salt. And like I said, since that resource is just crazy hard to get and is overly expensive, way overpriced, it's tough to craft a huge amount of food that focuses purely on constitution outside of the ones we talked about right here. So let's move into melee DPS. So from a melee DPS standpoint, you have a couple key foods that I would recommend that won't break the bank. The first one I want to talk about here is the garlic steak. So this is a low tier food that will increase your strength by 6 and your dexterity by 4. So if you love to roll a hatchet musket or a hatchet bow, great food to pick up, super cheap to make, and you can make a ton of it. But the next thing I want to talk about is the fall harvest turkey, right? We're coming up on American Thanksgiving. This is a perfect food to make. It gives big boosts to dexterity and strength. Plus, again, so cheap to make, so cheap to make. I sourced everything out for this entire recipe, and it was like 20 gold for everything. So I'd highly recommend this one for both ranged and melee DPS because you get so much of it. Now, if you want pure strength, then I would recommend the roasted new fish. Now, this one is another legendary fish recipe, but I think it's worth investing. You get a 40-point bonus to strength that lasts for 40 minutes. And again, just like the tarragon and salt, the cost, I believe, is offset by the amount of strength bonus that you get. So as you're going into Spriggan Arena, as you're going into, well, honestly, all the different arenas, plus high-end expeditions, things like that, having this type of bonus is incredibly important. So let's talk about rapier users really quick, because rapier users are a little bit different. They're melee DPS, but they focus on dexterity, and they also scale with intelligence. So we need dex and int foods. And one of the best low-cost foods I can recommend is the roasted pork shank. This one gives increases to intelligence and dexterity, focusing on dexterity. And like I said, both these scale with the rapier, plus it's so cheap to make. You only need pork, cabbage, butter, and sage. And all of these cost less than 2 gold each right now. You can go buy a ton of this, make a huge buffet, and have a lot of dex int food available that you can just eat constantly. Now, if you want a top tier food as a rapier user, then I would go with the poacher's pie. You get 24 points to dexterity, 16 points to intelligence, And honestly, this recipe is also super cheap. The most expensive thing you need to pick up is a sumptuous rabbit, and right now those are going for 15 gold each. So it's not exactly going to break the bank. So I would say between these two, you can make a ton of the roasted pork shank just to have on hand and eat constantly. And then as you get into a more serious engagement or a fight, then you can eat the poacher's pie for those massive boosts to dexterity and intelligence. So we talked about melee DPS, let's talk about ranged DPS. So for ranged DPS, there will be a little bit of overlap since bows and muskets both use dexterity, which we did talk about in the melee DPS category. But we also have some casters in here, right? We have people that use magic, so they need intelligence food. So let's take a look at what we can eat to give those folks some boosts. So if you want pure dexterity, then I would say look no further than the fried albinaja. This gives a plus 40 boost to dexterity. It can get a little pricey because it is a legendary fish, but other than that, the ingredients are super cheap, they're plentiful, and I would say go for it, dive on in. Now in terms of another food, we have the poached fish with lemon and dill. And this food is just great. I mean, it gives boost to dexterity and constitution. And because fish fillets, lemon, and dill are so incredibly cheap, you can make a huge buffet of these and make them super easy. Also, it does require water, and you have places like Windsward and Morningdale that both have running streams, so you can easily get a ton of this without having to leave town. So I'd highly recommend, if your kitchen is upgraded enough, craft in Windsward or Morningdale. Now for casters, we do have the blackened fish fillet, which does give a large increase to intelligence for really, really cheap. Again, you only need a few lemons, butter, seasoning blend, and fish fillets. All of these are incredibly easy to find and easy to craft. But if you can afford it, I would go for the braised wolf loin as well. This does give you a 18-point increase to intelligence and a 12-point increase to dexterity. But again, kind of like we talked about for tanking, this is somewhat expensive because of the tender wolf loin. For some reason, these are going for a decent chunk of cash, and the cinnamon, which are about 4 gold to 5 gold each. So not exactly going to be crazy expensive, but it is more expensive than we've seen with our other recipes. Now, if you want the top tier food for casters, I'm talking this is, food or bust. I would recommend the glazed bear with sauteed veggies. This one gives you a huge 24-point boost to intelligence and a 16-point boost to constitution. They're incredibly easy to make, and honestly, they're pretty cheap as well. So you don't really have to go out, break the bank in order to make this top tier food, or you don't have to spend a ton of time farming in order to go back and make this food. So I would say, if you can, stick with the glazed bear with sauteed veggies, but if that one is a little bit outside of your price range on your server, then I would go with the braised wolf loin. Those are the two things that I would recommend for casters. Now, lastly, if you just need a food just to burn through as a magic user, campfire stew. This one is super cheap. I'm talking dirt cheap. You can make a ton of it. It's easy to level up your cooking using this as well. So that's one to keep an eye on. So that wraps up some easy and cheap and also top tier foods to make for each role. Now, I know some of these things are fairly straightforward, right? And there were a handful of top end foods left out, but because either certain resources are so overpriced or because there just really isn't a way to reliably get those materials you need, I just didn't add those. I mean, it doesn't really make sense to drop 100 gold to make a single serving rather than taking that same 100 gold and making 20 servings and only sacrificing a few points. So let's go ahead and keep this thing moving and let's jump into the best gathering foods to eat for all of you crafters out there. So gathering foods are ones that are going to give you a big increase in luck, whether you're out harvesting, skinning, gathering, mining, all of this stuff. And these are huge when it comes to finding tier 4 and tier 5 resources that are needed for end game crafting, or you can take that same material and throw it out onto the trading post to make some quick gold. So luckily these are really easy to make and they begin unlocking very early at level 7. So these foods are divided into 3 categories. So you have low tier foods that increase your luck by 1,000. You have medium tier foods that increase your luck by 1400, and you have top tier foods that increase your luck by 2000. So we'll go through each one and I'll give you kind of a recommendation if one outweighs another. So for logging, you have roasted cabbage, boiled cabbage, and salted poultry with cabbage. Now, the roasted ones are the easier ones to make. They only require 3 ingredients: cabbage, cooking oil, and dill. Dill, super cheap right now. It's like $1 per dill out on the trading post. And then cabbage itself can be found at Merrill's Place. And you can get a ton of cabbage out at Merrill's Place in a super short amount of time. But even with that being said, I would still recommend going with the top tier salted poultry with cabbage. This one is much cheaper and easier to make than the 1400, which is the boiled cabbage, and you get 2000 luck instead of 1400. Now, obviously, if you're too low of a level and you can't craft salted poultry yet, then go with the roasted cabbage. But if you have the means, go with the salted poultry. It makes much more sense. Now for mining, you're looking at roasted potatoes, herb roasted potatoes, and salted roasted vegetables. This is kind of the opposite. So both of these, well, all of these actually, take potatoes and butter. These are both super easy to craft and they're very cheap to pick up at the trading post. Now the big difference between the two lower tier ones are cinnamon for the 1400 food and peppercorn for the 1000 food. Peppercorn are only $1 each, while cinnamon is around 3 to 5 gold each. So there is kind of a huge price difference if you don't go out and harvest the resources yourself, but again, it's not going to break the bank. Now the top tier food, which is the salted roasted vegetables, does require salt. It's right there in the name. And again, this is crazy expensive, so I would highly recommend just stick with the 1400 food unless you can reliably find and farm salt right now. Now, when it comes to harvesting, we have corn, cornbread, and steak pie, all of which require corn. Big surprise. So here's the issue with the first two foods. Again, we're looking at salt. So we're not exactly going to be making a ton of those. However, with the last one, steak pie, you don't need salt, and it actually is much cheaper to make, and you get that 2000 point boost. So you save money, get a bigger benefit, and it's cheaper to make, or easier to make rather. So this one just makes a lot more sense. Go for the steak pie and cut out corn and cornbread for now. And then we have roasted carrots, herb roasted carrots, and savory fish. And these are the way to go for your skinning boost. So if you're someone who likes to go out and skin, these are the foods you want to look at. And these ones are pretty similar. But again, I would highly recommend sticking with roasted carrots early on, because herb roasted carrots are just too expensive to make. So right now, stick with your roasted carrots for your 1000 luck boost until you get to the point where you can make savory fish cakes. And at that point, switch over to the fish cakes. They're much cheaper, they're much easier to make, and they give you that 2000 point boost instead of 1000. So it's kind of weird. So it just seems like all of these gathering foods, the middle tier one is the more expensive one to make or the more difficult one to source. And the top tier one is easy to find and easy to craft, and the lower tier one is easy to craft naturally. So something isn't really adding up here. You'd figure it would have almost like a scaling ramp where it would get progressively more difficult to find those resources, but ultimately that's not the case. So I would say stick with the 1000 and then skip the 1400 and go straight to the 2000 if you can. So within the trade skill foods, we just talked about the gathering ones, but there's also a certain subset that gives you boosted to crafted items. And we're going to talk about those foods now, and those are the ones that improve your minimum gear score. So these foods begin unlocking at 51, and they help increase the minimum gear score of items that you create. Because as you craft items, they're going to randomly roll a score within a range. Now these foods will help push that range further, so you have a higher chance of crafting a better item. Now this affects weaponsmithing, jewel crafting, armoring, arcana, and engineering. So for arcana, we have wildberry compote and sweet wildberry infusion. Now the key item here is going to be strawberries. A lot of people are having trouble finding strawberries. You can actually find a ton of these. I'm talking a ton out at Moe's Farm in South Windsward. So go out there, check the fields, because you'll find a bunch there. For armoring, we have honey brew and spicy cabbage soup. Now, this one can be a bit tough because the key items you need are nutmeg, ginger, and barley. Now, nutmeg and ginger, these can be found in herb plants, and they're fairly cheap to find out on the trading post. But for some reason on my server, barley is crazy expensive. Not sure why. You can harvest it from barley plants naturally, and these can be found out at Merrill's place in Windsward, but they're pretty much always on cooldown when I run by, and I just haven't stuck around to harvest some. So right now they're going for, I think, roughly 25 gold each, if I remember correctly. So keep that in mind as you're looking at armoring boosts. Next up, we have jewel crafting. This one has melon infusion and glazed melon bread. The big item here is cinnamon, which can be found in Eden Grove herb plants, and melons, which are found at random farms throughout Everfall and Windsward. Next up, we have engineering. So engineering has two foods. We have herb roasted squash and herb crusted vegetables. Now, squashes are pretty commonly found throughout Windsward and Everfall, especially again at Moe's farm. You can go up there and grab over 100 of them within a few moments if all the fields are full, so keep your eye out for some squashes. Now, nuts themselves are found in any forest, but these are a little bit tricky because they blend in really well with all the bushes and the trees, so keep an eye on your compass and look for the herb icon. That way you can find those nuts. Now, in terms of weaponsmithing, we have 3 to look out for: herb crusted broccoli, roasted vegetable medley, and savory vegetable medley. So these 3 foods do scale up. So you have the first one, which is herb crusted broccoli, which becomes available at level 51 and gives you a boost of 10 points. The medleys unlock at 101 and give a 12-point boost and a 15-point boost. Now, all of them take broccoli and the seasoning blend, but the medley adds in squash and cooking oil as well, so you'll have to go out and once again farm squash out at Moe's farm and craft some cooking oil using those nuts. In terms of broccoli, super easy to find. Go out to Willett's homestead in Windsward and you can farm a ton of it super quick and super easy. So the last thing I want to talk about, this is a specific group of foods that are only available in Outpost Rush, and they give you boosts to movement speed, damage to PvE enemies, damage to PvP enemies like players. So make sure to eat these once Outpost Rush is back. We have Zephyr Cakes. These increase your movement speed by 10%. You don't have to craft these. You can actually just buy them and then eat them. And we all know this is super nice to have in New World, where you spend so much time running all over the place, especially in Outpost Rush, where you need to get from point A to point B rather quickly. Then we have Battle Bread. This gives you a 10% increase to damage against enemy players. And lastly, we have Monster Slayer's Stew, which gives you a 15% damage increase to PvE creatures, which is going to be super important when you're going to kill the bosses that are scattered throughout Outpost Rush Island. So there is one last food I want to talk about, and that is the tart fruit salad. This one gives you a 25% boost to stamina regeneration, and that is just so nice to have. I mean, stamina, you use it for everything. You can dodge roll more often, you can roll cancel more often, you can get your block back faster. It just affects so many things. So having a handful of these is a great idea. They're super easy to make, very cheap to acquire, and it's just all upside with the good old-fashioned tart fruit salad. So that wraps this one up, folks, and these are all my recommended best foods to eat for each aspect of New World. Hopefully this helped give you an idea of how powerful cooking is and help to kind of bring some awareness to all the cool foods you can make to help give you an edge in whatever you're doing. And again, thank you so much for all the support with New World. It's been incredible. But as always, this has been Vulkan, and I will talk to you next time.